Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles
from Valves & More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 286, we're going to take a look at unknown tube number 5. Oh, wait a minute, we got two different tubes here. I should have said unknown tubes.
number 5 and 5.5.
5A, 5B. Anyways, we're going to look at 6K11 and 6U10 tubes. And they're actually very similar, so that's why Charles put them together. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Okay, Charles, these look like they've got like a dozen pins, maybe 13 if it was a baker's dozen.
No, it's exactly a dozen, and these guys actually use almost all of them amazingly.
So there's 11 pins?
11 pins getting used, and one that's just sitting there doing nothing.
Huh. You think they would have figured out something to do with that last pin. Well, we'll look at the data sheet in a minute, and we'll see that open pin. So what's going on with these weird things?
Okay, so before we get into the specifics of both of these tubes, let's talk about the type first of all. This is probably one of the last consumer formats for vacuum tubes that was ever invented, and it was created by GE and championed by them in the 1960s. And it was done because transistors were sort of the new kid on the block. They were smaller, they were more efficient, and they were getting better with every year. And so to compete with them, GE had to make a smaller, more efficient, and denser vacuum tube.
and more compact as a result.
Hence Compactron.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
So whenever you're combining a bunch of tubes into one envelope, which, you know, they were doing before this, the dual triodes out there were two tubes in one envelope.
The 6SN7 and the 12AU7 and the 12AX7 were really very popular with everybody, basically.
Yep, and you get to share the heater current and voltage across those tubes. So it makes them more efficient as you add more sections inside that one envelope. But you end up with a whole bunch more pins needing to get connected up. Isn't this amazing? We've got 12 pins here.
You also end up with a problem in which if you needed all three tubes that are inside that envelope and one of them has a problem, you've lost the other two. So now you've got to replace the entire tube.
Yep. Yeah, so it does add to the possibility that something goes wrong. Okay, so let's talk about these two tubes specifically. Let's talk about this one first. So this is the 6U10. We've got this lovely Zenith logo on here that's actually still intact. And the 6U10 is essentially a 6SN7 or a 12AU7 or a 6CG7 in that it has two medium gain sections in here that have a decent amount of current, so they're good for voltage gain or driving, and a single section out of a 12AX7, so it has a single high gain section in here.
So half a 12AX7.
Yeah, so it's like they smashed a 6SN7 and half of a 12AX7 together into one bottle and gave you a 6U10.
Cool.
And these are pretty neat, although they aren't used very much because that's sort of a bit of a weird combination. You don't see those sort of section combinations being used like that. Probably it was mostly used in TVs or radios, but this guy did see some more commercial use, and we can tell that because we actually managed to find a decent number of them in our collection. So more of them were probably produced, even though all the Compactrons really weren't produced for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, when in our wee warehouse, we have hundreds of thousands of tubes, and it's always a good indication. What we actually have in our warehouse is always a good indication of whether a tube had large manufacturing numbers, a lot of manufacturers were making the tube, or we could even see the various versions of the tubes over the decades.
If they continued to iterate them or not.
So when we go looking for a tube for a customer and we only have one or we have none of them, we know right away it's a rare tube.
Yeah. But whenever you find a whole bunch of them, you know that they were producing them, at least in decent quantities, because probably there were a lot of hardware manufacturers or device manufacturers that were using them. And in this case, this is the 6K11. I don't know if you can catch that. It's a very light etching on this tube. And the 6K11 was used in a number of Ampeg guitar amps. And I'm sure it was probably used in some other places because this would be very well suited in, say, a phono gain stage because it has essentially a 12AX7, a full 12AX7, so 2 high gain sections, and a medium gain single section, so something like half of a 6SN7 in here, which would be great for a cathode follower, a driving stage, or something like that, maybe even a phase splitter.
Now, were any of these used in popular commercial amps?
Yeah, they were used in a series of Ampegs that were really popular. Ampeg actually, I think, went in fairly big with the Compactrons, and there are a few really rare types out there that they use in a couple of their amps that are almost impossible to find now. Thankfully, we still have these guys, and they are... I just think they're really neat.
You like weird tubes, though.
I really like weird tubes. Now let's take a quick look at the data sheet. You can see that pinout diagram. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And there's that one lone pin that we're not using, pin 8.
You think they would have put a shield or something on pin 8?
Well, actually, that's the interesting thing I just noticed, is it does actually have a shield separating the 12AX7 section, or sorry, the 6SN7 section from the 12AX7 sections.
Which makes sense.
But they didn't connect it to a pin, it's just an internal shield.
Now, if you want to get some idea as to when a tube was introduced, if you're on the data sheet of the parent developer, so General Electric was a big innovator in technology at the time, and a lot of the data sheets will have a date on it. And in this case, it's December 1960. And most likely that is actually the year of release. They probably developed it in 1958, 59, and then released it in 1960. It's not always true that the date will tell us that, but often that'll give us a good indication of when the tube came out for release.
Yeah, and if we take a quick look at just the AC heater here, we can see that it's using a standard 6.3 volt heater, but it's only using about 600 milliamps, which is better than if you had two separate tubes, something like a 12AU7 or a 6SN7, along with a 12AX7 would have been a better choice, along with something like a 6C4, which would have been half of a 6SN7. So they did make them more efficient. So they succeeded in that.
I think the size probably is what would have attracted manufacturers because...
Absolutely.
You know, when you're competing with the emerging solid-state technology, having huge tubes filling up spaces would have definitely annoyed a manufacturer because more chassis is more cost. And if you can get two and a half tubes per bottle, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
Well, if you're thinking...
If the measure of a tube is a dual triode.
Yeah, and, you know, by the 1960s, the vast majority of audio tubes in use, at least at the preamp driver stage, were all dual triodes.
Yep.
And the most popular, of course, was the 6SN7, 12AU7, and 12AX7. And maybe the higher gain 6SL7. But the 12AX7 really took over for high gain applications.
Yeah. So, unlike the Loctals that were made much earlier by Sylvania, the Compactrons actually had a fairly wide series of types that were out there. There's a website out there. I'll see if I can put a link to it in the description called the Junk Box Guide to Compactrons. And it lists the types of sections that are available in them. There were power tubes. I believe there were rectifier versions of them. Some of them actually got quite large because they had a bunch of different sections in them, like a full-size power stage and a driver and a gain stage.
Oh, I think I've seen some of those over the years. When we do huge tube sorts, we have to rapidly go through and identify, what tubes we're going to clean and test, and what tubes go into the basically hold. It looks interesting. Pile, and those big weird tubes would have gone into that.
Oh yeah, they went into the weird pile for sure.
Yeah.
But thankfully, we actually have a reasonable number of these guys in stock, new old stock, in box. And we just checked our testers, and we can actually test them on our B&K 700 for emissions, unfortunately. So we can't do a GM test on them, and we can't noise test them, but we can make sure they're functioning. And if they were new old stock, then they should be good to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why if you're doing development work, working with a new old stock tube is a great advantage, because if you don't have a lot of testing capability for it and you're developing a circuit around a tube, and you're not even sure if the bloody tube is working, that can be a disaster, because you may be trying to troubleshoot a circuit that's got no problems at all. It's the tube that's got the problem.
Well, the tube is the amplifier. In this case, it's 3.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I can see your wheels are turning. I suspect that you would love to see a phono preamp with just one tube per channel.
That would be pretty neat. But these are, like I said, they're getting kind of rare now. And I don't know if we can actually find them in any sort of quantity.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do you know if the Russians made an equivalent to the Compactron?
Oh, I highly doubt it. I don't think I've ever seen a Russian version of a Compactron.
Right. So that would be a good... an old Soviet equivalent would be a great option, but unfortunately they only really copied tubes that they could make use of. So, in quantities, the Russians, the Soviet engineers copied the really popular stuff like the 6SN7,
Yep.
the 6SL7. Did they make a version of I don't think they made a version of the 12EU7.
Not exactly. I think they probably replaced that with the 6N6P or the 6N1P. The 6N6P, interestingly, actually performs like a 6SN7 whenever it, or a 12AU7 whenever it's run at the same operating point. But they did copy the 12AX7 with the 6N2P.
Right, that's true. Okay, well, that's really interesting. Well, thanks for digging those out and getting all dirty in the warehouse, Charles.
So I'm going to test these guys and hopefully get them in the store in the weird tube section. And if anybody out there has an old Ampeg guitar amp and is interested in them, well, they'll be in there. But I think we've got some other stuff to show off.
Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, now we're going to look at just one type that we've been really putting a lot of focus in on, and we've been quite lucky. Charles got really lucky and found a huge lot of tubes that had some really high demand stuff that was actually testing really good.
Yep, surprisingly good.
I can't tell. That happens maybe once every year or two with us.
Mm-hmm. It's cause for celebration.
Except I don't drink anymore, and you don't either. So,
no. So break out the fake bubbly.
Well, I think we're going to have a barbecue to celebrate.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, some nice steak on the Barbie. So, what is one of the best sounding 6SN7s ever made? Everybody, repeat after me. The early Sylvanias, the GTAs in particular. But there are a lot of versions of this tube. Does that mean that there are some real bad sounding ones and some really great sounding ones and some mediocre ones? No, they all sound good, but some will sound better, and it's normally the earlier types that sound better. The difference isn't huge, but you can really hear it on a good resolving system. So, and I've got these lined up sort of in the order. Now, we don't have a lot of these. We've never really had a lot of them. So what you're looking at is what's available in the store. So I'm showing them as matched pairs. So this is the early, what we call the back-to-back straight plate. This is the first generation Sylvania GTA. And you can really tell these, it's easy. You can see how the plates are back-to-back. There's no angle. They have a lot of chrome on the dome. So we call that a full chrome.
And these came right after the Bad Boys, didn't they?
That's right. So in fact, they were being made probably at the same time. So these date starting about 1951 or 52, and the last years for the Bad Boys was 51, 52. So they basically overlapped. And I think given the fact that the tube orientation's identical to the Bad Boys, these are essentially a higher spec bad boy, basically.
Or the closest thing you can get to it.
Yeah, in a shorter envelope, so the glass shrunk a little bit. The sound is similar, but not the same, because the specs went up. So you can't play a 6SN7 GT in a lot of equipment without annoying the tube and possibly destroying it. But the GTA is basically a modern spec 6SN7. The difference between a GTA and a GTB is just the spec on the filament, and nobody really cares about, series string or warm-up specs.
Unless you're repairing old TVs.
Yeah. So, and nobody's putting a Sylvania GTA into a TV, I hope. And if you are, I'll give you some tubes to swap out. Anyways, this is the first generation, and finding them new old stock is just so unusual these days. We are celebrating. The next generation is the angled plate version, and it from this moment on, in about the mid-1950s, Sylvania built all their 6SN7s on this platform. What happened, though, is the base size would change and become smaller. We'll look at a smaller base in a minute. The chrome got smaller and smaller as we got into the 60s, into the last years of production in the 1970s.
And part of that actually is because they changed their mica design to a full circle, so it was harder for it to flash further down the tube, like you see on these guys. This one doesn't have a full circle mica, but these ones do.
Right. So sonically, they're very similar. I normally give the nod to the straight plates, but if you'd never heard straight plates before, you would be in love with the angled plate version. And here we've got probably the last year or years of production in which we have a shorter base, full chrome cap. This is still a GTA, and they still sound really good. But once the short base shows up, I think that's the last couple of years of production. I don't know that for sure. It's not something, there's no history books written about this. Every once in a while we pick up a little snippet. Some old gentleman will reminisce online, or somebody will have picked up a little bit of research, or we'll read a document and we'll find some little tidbit that we never knew before.
Yeah.
So it's possible it was just a different factory. The 6SN7 was a hugely popular tube. It was being used by the millions all over the world in anything and everything that needed an electronic circuit. And as a result, the big tube companies were opening plants.
And there were many production lines, even under one company.
Just to keep up. And as a result, when a new production line opened up, if it had molds for a shorter base and not the taller base, well, they're not going to be fussed by it. They're going to use the shorter base, right? So, but as time got on with the development of tubes, as we saw earlier with the Compactrons, no tubes got bigger and bigger. They just kept getting smaller and smaller because TVs needed more and more tubes, and they needed to compact the tubes as much as possible to get them in there. And of course, tabletop radios could no longer be like floor-mounted radios. And
the automation in the manufacturing got better and better as well, so it was easier for them to make smaller and smaller tubes.
Yeah. So anyways, we've got these 3 pairs in the store, and when they're gone, they're gone. And we keep the store inventory set up so that if you see, let's say 3 showing up as one ASN, that tells you that we have, if you order 2, that you'll get the matched pair and that there's a single. That's how the store is set up now. If we had the store set up with, let's say, 5 of these, that would let you know that we have 2 pairs plus a single. So in order to get a matched pair, of course, you have to buy 2 tubes, right? Yeah, the only tubes that we sell as sets are power tubes, because everybody needs either a pair of power tubes or, more commonly, a quad or 4 matched tubes. Well, this is Jim
and Charles
signing off. Cheers, everyone.